We are finally going to be making some pasta sauce and pizza sauce so we can have it on the shelf when we need it. Hello family, welcome back. If you're new here, welcome. I am Vicki and you are with Gravy in the Kitchen. So I bought everything I needed, mainly the large cans of diced tomatoes, sometimes between March and June. I don't even know when I bought that. But with Amanda's health and everything, we were going back and forth to North Carolina. I never got the time to actually make it. So we're going to make it today. So I have 6 number 10 cans, which is 6 pounds, 6 ounces of diced tomatoes, 6 cans of 6 ounce tomato paste. I have all my herbs and spices over here. And then I went ahead and took some frozen onions, carrots, celery, and garlic out of the freezer yesterday. It's been sitting in the refrigerator, but first we need to go ahead and cook the vegetables. Get those pureed, then we can build our sauce. I have a cup of extra virgin olive oil. I'm just going to put into the Dutch oven. I have it on medium heat. I have 3 packs of frozen diced onions, and they're 1 cup each. If you were using fresh onions, just cut up 3 cups of onions. I have approximately 3 cups of celery that we had diced and put in the freezer. And 3 cups of carrots. So I'm going to bring this up to a simmer. Let it simmer for about 30 minutes until those vegetables can be soft. Then we're going to puree them. Now this is my 32 quart stock pot. I have it sitting on one of my 5-gallon buckets just to elevate it so I could get to it better. We're going to go ahead and dump our 6 cans of diced tomatoes. Ooh, choking on myself. And just to ensure we get all the goodness, we're going to swish some water in the cans. And then we're going to add our 6 cans of tomato paste. Add some water to the can. Mix that in really well. Now we're going to go ahead and add our herbs and spices. A half a cup of dry basil. Half a cup of dry oregano. 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, 2 teaspoons of onion powder, 1/4 cup of salt, 1/8 of a cup or 2 tablespoons of pepper, 2 teaspoons of thyme, 1/4 cup of brown sugar, and 1/2 cup of regular sugar. And I'm just going to use a standard stick blender to blend this to try to get those tomatoes as smooth as possible. Because my blender will not go all the way to the bottom, I have to constantly stir it as I'm blending. The oil and the vegetables on the stove has started to boil. We're going to let that go for a little bit. Now I do add the onion powder and the garlic powder to my sauce, as well as onions and garlic. I like the flavor of onions and garlic. If you do not, leave it out. You can make this sauce to fit your family. We are going to be making some pint-sized jars of pizza sauce. Now, pizza sauce is not something that I normally can, because I just take my pasta sauce, add a few more herbs to it, and it turns into pizza sauce. But the husband's been enjoying these little sandwich size, like on bread, pizzas. And he asked if I would make some pizza sauce so that he can have ready to go pizza sauce. That's why we're putting him in pints. As soon as the vegetables get soft, we're going to add some garlic. If you're using fresh garlic, I usually put about 2 full bulbs, peeled and diced, just roughly diced, because we're going to puree it anyway. But since I don't normally have fresh garlic in my house, I took out 6 garlic pucks, and each one of these is about 1/8 of a cup. So 3/4 of a cup of garlic, that's what we're using. I'm going to let those vegetables cook for about 30 minutes. We'll add the garlic, let it cook for an additional 5 to 10 minutes. Then we can puree it and put it in our sauce, in our large stock pot, and we can cook that. We only want to heat it up. We really don't want to cook it, because in the canning process, food is getting cooked anyway. Just want to heat it up because I want to do a hot pack. And hot pack is hot contents, hot jars, hot canner. Let's go ahead and add our garlic. And I'm going to let that cook for about 10 minutes, just so the garlic is no longer has that raw flavor. Turn the burner off. And now we're going to puree the vegetables with the oil. We want to make sure it's completely smooth. We have no chunks of any vegetables in here. Perfect. Our last inspection. All right, that looks good. And I'm just going over my recipe and make sure I have everything on here. So we have the diced tomatoes, the tomato paste, basil, oregano, garlic powder, onion powder, salt, pepper, thyme, sugar, brown sugar, celery, carrots, onions, garlic, olive oil. Perfect. Let's put our puree in with our tomato products. Mix that in. Let me go ahead and get my kitchen reorganized. Now we're just going to cook this sauce until it gets hot. Now my canner is a All-American 9-to-1, which will hold 7 quarts. So in this sink, I have 7 quart jars and some hot water just sitting there waiting for us till this comes up to temperature. Then in about 30 minutes or so, we'll get our canner start warming up. I have the required amount of water in it. We are going to be using our 4-jar lids, my favorite lids. I absolutely love 4-jar lids. Now we know this sauce is good. We've made it a couple times, but I do want to taste it to make sure. It is so good. We're just going to be stirring this occasionally just to make sure it's not charring on the bottom. And it's absolutely gorgeous. You can see all the little specks of herbs and spices. The tomatoes are pureed perfect. I put the lid on the pot, but I have it just off kilted just a bit so it doesn't boil over. As my tomato plants was producing tomatoes, I was just saving them, putting them in a Ziploc bag, and I was keeping them in the freezer. I ended up with 3.5 gallons of whole tomatoes. I'm going to turn this into a tomato soup. Since we're going to be canning pint-sized pizza sauce, I figured I could go ahead and can some pint-sized tomato soup also. I went ahead and took this out of the freezer yesterday. It's been sitting in the refrigerator. But I want to go ahead and remove the skins. And since they were frozen, and thawed, the skins will come off super easy. Let me go through all of these tomatoes. I still got to keep an eye on the pasta sauce on the stove. Make sure we're constantly stirring that. Okay, everything over here is up to temperature. We need to go ahead and get those in the jars. So I'm going to set my whole tomatoes to the side. I have a feeling we're not going to be making tomato soup today anyway, so that's okay. I've had the canner on for about maybe 20-30 minutes. It is warm. Our sauce is ready. Our jars are ready. Now the last time I made this sauce, we ended up with 19 quarts. But we're going to be making pizza sauce with 4 of those quarts, which is 8 pints. So that's about 15 quarts. Like I said, my canner will only hold 7 quarts at a time. We're going to have to do this in multiple sessions. Now, tomato products can be water bath if you add lemon juice or citric acid to make sure the acidity level is where it needs to be. I don't want to do that. I don't want to add acid to my sauce. Plus, we do have carrots, celery, onions, garlic, and those items cannot be water bath. So we're going to be pressure canning this. And you would take all your ingredients, the tomatoes, the carrots, the celery, the onions, the garlic, and you will find the time that takes the longest to pressure can. And in this case, it would be carrots. Carrots has to process under pressure for 30 minutes. So we are going to pressure can our pasta sauce for 30 minutes to accommodate the time it takes to can carrots. I went ahead and turned the stove off to the pasta sauce. Once we get the 7 jars filled up, I want to make sure this stays warm. So we will constantly stir it, turn the heat on, let it stay on for a little while, turn the heat off. I don't want to cook the sauce, but I need it to stay hot. So just make it easier, I have a 2-cup measuring cup and an 8-cup measuring cup. I'm going to take it from the pot in here, dump it in here so we can pour it into the jars. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm dipping the smaller measure cup into the sauce. And I don't want to dip the big one in there. And I can just rest that right there on the side when we need to fill up the bigger measuring cup. We have our vinegar, our lids, our rings, our funnel, the debubbler, and the measurer. That's for the headspace, by the way. And then the jar lifter. We're going to leave a 1-inch headspace. And as for the jar, when you see that solid ring that goes around before you get to the threads, that is 1 inch. Let's start filling our jars. And make a mess. Now we're going to take our debubbler. Make sure we don't have no air bubbles in here, or as minimum as possible. Do want to wipe my jars down just a bit where I spilled pasta sauce all over the place. I even got some on my lids. Let me wipe those down. So we have our vinegar, a paper towel. Let's wipe the rims down really well. Make sure we don't have no oil or tomatoes or anything on those edges, because that's going to interfere with the seals of our lids to the jars. We're going to put a brand new 4-jar lids. Oh, I got a little bit of sauce on that. Let me wipe it down again. Make sure our lid is clean. Goodness, I can't pick it up. Okay. And a ring. Just fingertip tight. We talked about this last week. We do not want to crank it down too tight. We're going to add the remainder of vinegar into the water. And now we're going to put our 7 quart-sized jars of pasta sauce right into the canner. I was actually talking to a friend last night. She has the one, well, she actually has 2 now. She has the All-American that does double stack quarts. I would love to have one of those. Plus she has the one, and I'm not sure how many quarts it is, but it's in between mine and her 14 quarts. But to have double stack, that means I can do this pretty much in one time. But this will work just fine for us. We have 7 quarts of pasta sauce in the canner. We're going to put our lid on, matching up the arrow on the top to the indent that's on the bottom. We're going to do a quick inspection to make sure the top and the bottom is equally spaced all the way around. Raise our wing nuts. Start putting those down. We're just securing it. We're not ready to tighten it up yet. Do another visual, and it looks like the front is too low. So I'm loosening the front 3, and I'm going to tighten up the back 3. Do another inspection. Again, it's too close in the front. Loosen those. Tighten up the back. Doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to pull out the measuring tape, but you do want it as close as possible. I think we're good. Now we're going to tighten those wing nuts down, going opposite from the other. Turn the flame up to medium. And then we're going to let it heat up. It's already hot, but we need to let it heat up. We're going to have steam come out of this steam valve. Let it release steam for 10 minutes. Then we're going to put our weight on. This weight has a 5, 10, and 15 pound pressure. My altitude on the East Coast, Mid-Atlantic, we are at 10 pounds of pressure. Once we let steam vent for 10 minutes, we'll put our weight on the 10 pounds. Then the gauges start moving up. Once it gets to 10 pounds of pressure, the weight will start jiggling and making all kinds of noise. And we're looking for 4 jiggles a minute. So it's going to jiggle 4 times a minute. We do not want it to go less than 4 times a minute, and we don't need it to go higher than 4 times a minute. So we will adjust the flame to achieve 4 jiggles a minute. This is going to take a couple hours because we have to let it natural release before we can take our weight off. And then we have to do the whole 5-minute increments between taking the weight off, wait 5 minutes, remove the wing nuts, have the lid resting on the base, 5 minutes, take the lid off, 5 minutes, and then we could take our jars out of the canner. And then the process will start all over again to finish this sauce. I'm not going to worry about turning the heat on that for right now because it's going to be a while. I'll just keep an eye on it, and if it's starting to like cool down a bit, we'll heat it back up. Perfect time to do dishes and do some fun stuff. 30 minutes is up for the canner. I turn the burner off. We're going to let that natural release. And when I make pizza sauce, I just take a quart of my pasta sauce and I add oregano, garlic powder, and onion powder. Whisk that in really well, and then I use that for pizza sauce. But since we're canning it, and I want to make sure I have at least 8 pints of pizza sauce, I went ahead and took out a gallon of sauce, and I have it in this bowl. And my recipe calls for a tablespoon of each one of these ingredients per quart. So we need 4 tablespoons or a quarter of a cup for a gallon. So it's a quarter cup of oregano, a quarter cup of garlic powder, and a quarter cup of onion powder. We're going to whisk that in. And now we have 8 pints worth of pizza sauce. We have to let the canner come down to pressure before we can take the weight off. So we can open the lid and take the jars out, and then we need to start all over. I still have, maybe that much of sauce left in here. It's probably enough to do another canner, but we have to wait on the canner before we go any further. So if we get to the pizza sauce today, we'll get to it. If we don't, it's no big deal. We can do it tomorrow. So I'll see you in about an hour or so. The pressure has natural release. I took the valve off. Now we're going to wait for the whole 5-minute increments. We're going to wait 5 minutes, remove the lid, have it sitting on the base, wait 5 minutes, take the lid off, wait 5 minutes, then we can take our jars out. I'm going to turn the burner back on. At that time, I do have the sauce heating back up, and in the sink I have 7 quarts heating up in some hot water. And I'm just going to repeat the process until all the sauce in the stock pot is in jars. Right over there we have the pizza sauce. In the refrigerator I have the thawed out frozen tomatoes for the tomato soup. So I got the last 4 quart-sized jars of pasta sauce in the canner, and I went ahead and jarred up 3 pints of the pizza sauce, letting it come up to temperature and steam. But I want to go ahead and get started on the tomato soup. Probably not going to finish it tonight, but I need to start cooking these tomatoes down. So I have them all peeled. So I got the big measuring cup. I want to see how much this is going to be. And that looks like about 8 cups. All right, so we're going to say 4 cups of whole peeled tomatoes. And it did produce a lot of water. Yeah, about 3.5 cups. Interesting. I'm going to put this on the stove. I'm going to turn the burner on, but I'm going to turn it down low. And I just got a little masher. Now there's still plenty water in here, but just in case, we do have the water that was drained. But I do want this to cook, probably for a couple hours. I'll keep track of the time and let you know how long that takes. Welcome to the second day of canning. So I left the whole tomatoes that I smashed up on the stove for 2.5 hours. And then I let it cool down and I stuck it in the refrigerator. But I need to put it back on the stove so it can heat back up, finish cooking. That way we can make some soup. I have bay leaves. I'm just going to drop 2 in here. Let that cook with the tomatoes. Now I have not put any seasoning, salt and pepper, or anything in those tomatoes. But I want them to heat up and get really, really, really soft so we can puree it with the stick blender. Well, first we need to remove those bay leaves and then puree it with the stick blender, and then we can add our spices. And the pizza sauce is still in the refrigerator. When we're ready to can the tomato sauce, we'll can the pizza sauce also, but I need to heat that up. I need to get my jars ready. And then we can start the process of canning. All the pasta sauce has been jarred. We ended up with 18 quart-sized jars, but I had 2 jars, one in 2 separate processing, that the lids blew. That is not 4 jars lids' fault. It was my fault. I think I just didn't have the screw top on tight enough. I'm not really sure, but they came off. So we have 2 that did not seal. We have to use those really quick. I have plans for 1. And the other one, I'm not quite sure if I want to make a pasta sauce. You know, spaghetti or something. Lasagna? Spaghetti. Baked something. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But this is going to go into the refrigerator. The 2 that did not seal. And we have 7 days to use this. I'm not worried about it. I can either put them in the freezer or use them within 7 days. So I'm just going to leave the tomatoes on the stove, let those heat up, and then we'll move on. So far we just have the whole tomatoes and the bay leaves in here. I have about a cup of carrots. They were frozen. It's no big deal. They'll thaw in here. We're going to puree everything together, so it'll be fine. A cup of onions. Once those vegetables soften, we're going to remove the bay leaves and then puree it, and then we'll start adding our seasonings. Okay, I'm going to bring you back. So yesterday or last evening, I just stopped. I was done. I was tired. I was done. The tomato soup was cooking on the stove for about 3.5 hours. And then I let it cool off and I put it in the refrigerator. And then this morning I got up, I took it out of the refrigerator, put it back on the stove, heated it up, and I added some carrots and some onions. I cooked it with the carrots and onions for a little bit and let it cool off, and now I've got it all pureed, nice and smooth. But as for the pasta sauce, I had 2 jars that blew out. That sauce was coming out. It siphoned really bad in the canner. It was 2 different batches, 1 jar for each batch, which was fine. I can use 2 jars of sauce between now and next week. But as they were sitting here, I had 2 more jars that the seals did not stick. Again, it looked like it had blown out because there was food residue on the rim of the jars underneath the lids. So I just wiped them down really well with some vinegar and a paper towel. I put a new canning lid on all 4 of those jars, and I have them in the canner. I am recanning those. I can't use 4 jars, and I don't want them in my freezer. If they work, they work. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But we need to get back to this tomato soup recipe. As soon as those jars come out of the canner, I still need to finish the pizza sauce and the tomato soup. So right now it is just tomatoes, carrots, and onions pureed. I do want to add about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. The rest of this we'll put on parchment paper and stick that in the freezer. It will not go to waste. Now, I found a recipe online. I'm probably not going to follow it completely because, for one, she starts off with 7 pounds of fresh tomatoes, goes through the process of blanching and peeling and all the things. Started off with 12 cups of frozen tomatoes. Let's do a teaspoon of salt, a half a teaspoon of pepper, teaspoon of garlic powder, a teaspoon of onion powder, teaspoon of oregano, and I'm going to put 2 teaspoons of basil. Let's stir that in really well. Give it a taste. And now we're just going to play with flavors. I am putting about 3/4 teaspoon of salt. It's a little bitter. I'm going to add a little bit of sweetness with some brown sugar. And I like using brown sugar because it has molasses, and molasses adds a rich umami flavor. Now once we get these in jars and we have it on our pantry shelf and we want to make a grilled cheese and a tomato soup, one of my favorite lunches in the winter, we can add some heavy cream and make a cream of tomato soup. But for home preservation, you cannot can milk or any kind of dairy products or noodles. All right, let's taste that. feel like it needs something. Needs more pepper. A little bit more salt. It's very acidic. You know, tomatoes are acidic. I'll put in another teaspoon of basil. Half a teaspoon of garlic powder. A half a teaspoon of onion powder. And a half a teaspoon of oregano. Let's see if that helps. I mean, we do have onions in here, but it's not very oniony flavor. It's very thick. I'm very happy with it. That's it. That's the perfect ratio of spices and herbs. The sweetness from those carrots and that brown sugar. Perfect. That is really good. On the side of this pan, there's a measurement. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, there it is, right there. Looks like we got 2.5 quarts from those homegrown tomatoes that we kept in the freezer. Very happy. So now we just have to wait till the canner is finished with the recanning of the pasta sauce. And I did go ahead and put in 3 jars of pizza sauce. I did 3 last night to go with 4 jars I had left to can, plus 3 pizza jars. Right now I got the 4 recanning jars plus 3 pizza jars. The rest of the pizza sauce is in the refrigerator. As soon as this canner is done, we'll get another canner going with tomato soup and pizza sauce. I'm going to wash dishes. We are ready to go ahead and can up the rest of the pizza sauce. I put it on the stove, heated it up, so we are doing hot packing. The canner is still hot because I took what was in there out. I have the tomato soup on the stove warming up. And by my calculations, there should be 4 pints left in this pan. It smells so good. And I am canning the tomato soup in the regular mouth pint-sized jar and the pizza sauce in the wide mouth. Even though I think I can tell them apart, this just ensures that I will be able to tell them apart. Then we're going to debubble a paper towel with vinegar, checking for any defects on the edge of the jars, plus get any kind of residue that will be sitting there, preventing the lid from making a good seal. Brand new 4-jar lids. And a ring, fingertip tight. Alright, that one needs to go in the trash. Looks kind of ooky. The canner is still hot from when we took those jars out. I'm going to add these jars into a nice hot canner. I have the jars sitting in the sink in some hot water. And now our tomato soup. We're going to go to an inch headspace, which is that very bottom rim right there. Smells really good. You know, we gotta make a mess. I do not have enough to make a jar. That's okay. I'm just gonna put that in the refrigerator and we can have that for lunch. So I did end up with 5 pints of tomato soup. We're gonna debubble. I have a clean piece of paper towel. Wipe the rim. Now once you wipe the rim, do not touch it. The oils in your finger will also cause that lid not to seal. So if you touch it, wipe it again. And these are going to go into the canner. So I ended up with 8 pints. We're going to add our vinegar. Put the lid on. Put the wing nuts in place. And just like I said when we were canning our pasta sauce, we're going to go by whichever ingredient takes the long to process. And with the pasta sauce, it was carrots, and that was 30 minutes. For pints, it's 25 minutes. So once we get it up to pressure, we're going to set the timer for 25 minutes. After that time, we'll turn the burner off, and we're going to let it natural release, and then we can take our jars out. And recanning those 4 jars, they sealed. Thank goodness I don't have to have pasta sauce at the kazoo for this week. We ended up with a total of 18 quarts of pasta sauce. We have 9 pints of pizza sauce and 5 pints of tomato soup. Not too bad. And we'll let those sit there until tomorrow, along with those when they come out of the canner. Then we can take the rings off, give them a good wash. Always label your jars. I have the pizza sauce in pint size wide mouth, and I've got the tomato soup in pint size regular mouth. And this will be for lunch tomorrow. Very happy. But I just want to say thank you for hanging out with me in the kitchen while we got some tomato products for our pantry. The husband is going to be happy. He's got small jars of pizza sauce that he can make his little sandwich bread pizzas that he seems to be enjoying. I have pasta sauce that, whether we're making lasagna or ravioli or just spaghetti with meat sauce, we're okay for a couple months. And I have some tomato soup. The husband doesn't care for tomato soup, so all 5 of these pints belong to me. So if you don't mind, give this video a thumbs up. And while you're at it, please subscribe. I would love to have you part of the Grammy family. In this kitchen, we learned how to do things in-house. Healthy eating with real food made from scratch. Until next time, you have a blessed day. Bye, family. I am so glad we finally got some pasta sauce, pizza sauce, and soup for the pantry shelves. Now, I get to clean the kitchen. No, we're not. Oh my goodness, I cannot talk. Oh my goodness. Nope. No. Ah, let's start all over. Dun, 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 dun. I need a new can opener.